People tell us we look alike, so that's the sister as well as the sister thing. So, good morning. Very happy to be here with all of you. And this is the second of 3 talks. I'm just so happy to get to be here with you at Vision. And I'm speaking into Reverend Patty's theme of looking with the eyes of God. And before I launch into the talk, I too want to acknowledge the situation in Aurora, and thank you so much for making mention of it. What is, of course, a dreadful and difficult thing in and of itself, but also we have a church in Aurora, New Dawn Center for Spiritual Living, and one of the women who lost her life was from that center, Rebecca Wingo. So contributions are being taken for her family. If you are moved to do that, we can get the information for you. She has 2 children, so it's a touching thing. And you know, I'm not a fan of pat spiritual comments, even though I may sound like that. And so I want to say that I find this kind of thing hard to understand because there really is no understanding. It's just that it is and that it took place. And what I know is that everybody's life is in the keeping of a vast mystery, and that we never know what anybody's soul agreement is. And we never know how something as difficult as it is will be used for something good. And so it's just to be in the mystery of it all. And it's to work with whatever rises up in our consciousness. As much as we think there's an it that we might be able to assess or comment on, the truth is what there is what rises in our own consciousness. And that's for our own personal work to do. And we have our hands full with just that, do we not? And so I accept a mighty healing presence. And I accept that the reality of God is out picturing in the most amazing ways there. And that really has to do with the talk for today, looking with the eyes of God, and then the talk is on your way. And we want to look with the eyes of God when it's difficult as well as when it's easy. When it's easy, it's easy. Oh, yeah, no problem. I can see the oneness and the goodness of things. It's times like this where that perception really counts. And that looking with the eyes of God means looking from the reality of God. And it means looking with the consciousness of God. And it means looking at the manifestation of God. And it's to do it just like faith is built in the most faithless times. The other times it's easy, you know. Now is when this perception of God really, really counts. And in Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes says, whatever we're looking for, we're looking with and looking at. And I'm going to edit Ernest Holmes and say, whatever we're looking from, we're looking with and we're looking at. And so it is the perception that we look from that conditions what we see and how it appears to us. And so this is the time to really practice at the highest level. And Vision is all about practical spirituality. That means that you let your spiritual truth hit the road of your life, where the rubber meets the road, where our principle hits life. So it's right now, in exactly this kind of situation that we seek to see with the eyes of God. Does that mean that there's something good that took place with a small g? Absolutely not. But it does mean that the abiding reality of God, synonymous with good with a capital G, is untouched by this. And that's a new thought principle, that God and good are the same thing, that God is the good to which there is no opposite. And it is not hurt, harmed, or touched by anything that took place. And the fact that we can claim that actually allows that good to come into life experience in ways that we can't even imagine. One of our core principles is about the ever-availability of good, and that's with a capital G. And so this is when we truly want to practice this. And so if we look from good, we will look with the consciousness of good, and we will seek to see good, not denying the forms, the small forms of not good that we see. Our practice is really not a practice in denial although some people like to say that that's true. So all of religious science is about getting us to this consciousness that there is only one thing called God, which is good. And Ernest Holmes brought that into our personal life. He said one thing that actually spoke the religious science movement into action. He said, there is only one life. This life is good, this life is God, and this life is my life now. And so he linked God and good in our personal life in a way that had not been done in exactly that way before. And so what we're here to do today, even though we're in this, our feelings about it, and our home office, our international headquarters is in Colorado, so you can bet that all the churches there are in deep prayer right now, and then we join with them in that. I can't remember where I started that sentence. Anyway, we want to bring the good of God, this perception, into our own personal life, and that's what the talk is about today. So can you go there with me? Okay, very good. Thank you. And we've been talking about the journey of life, that underneath the outer aspects of our life and our moving from here to there and accomplishing this and that and doing this and that and showing up on time and all of those things that we do, there's this more interesting, less linear, more twisty-turny kind of life that goes on underneath that is really the unfoldment of your own individual path. And what I want to invite you to do today is to see the inherent rightness of your path, both in its outer aspects but also in its inner aspects, because we are each on the way to the hallelujah. By the way, I love that song. Thank you. I mean, it's heaven when church starts with a Leonard Cohen song. Okay. That's heaven for me. So thank you. And it's to see the inherent rightness of your path regardless of how you've labeled your life, of the starts and the stops and the twists and the turns and the gains and the losses and the missteps and the happinesses and the things that weren't so. I invite you to see it all as good and to realize that you are a soul on a pathway of experience. That's how Ernest Holmes phrases it. And that every single thing that has gone on in your life is for the awakening and the learning of your soul. And Ernest Holmes says, mistakes are beyond the province of reality. Mistakes are beyond the province of reality with a capital R. In other words, there ain't no such thing. There isn't any such thing. And Ernest Holmes says, the soul is on a pathway of an endless and ever-expanding experience, and God's eyes only see it that way. God's eyes would only see the perfect awakening and unfolding of your soul, the perfect path for a perfect soul. And that's all there is. In his chapter on immortality, he says we keep on keeping on in our own individual life stream, and that's true in this life and it's true out of this life. And he also says that nature never lets us stay in one place for very long, only long enough to gather the learning and the experience necessary. And when that learning takes place, the body is dropped and the soul moves on. And so he's talking about the movement out of this life, but I think it's the same truth in this life, that we go from one learning experience to another learning experience. And so it's not that you've made any mistakes, it's just that your soul has selected some pretty interesting experiences for learning. And you could say, I'm having a very interesting learning experience today. And the opportunity for us is to bring this awareness to our life, to bring consciousness to our path, to actually pay attention to it, to actually witness what is taking place in our lives instead of being submerged by it or at the effect of it, but to develop the ability to witness what you're going through while you're going through it. To say, wow, I am having an interesting learning experience. That's what it is. And to be able to call it good. To be able to call it good with a capital G, because that's all there is. And so some of you know that way before I took up formal religious science training, I studied things esoteric. And one of the things that I studied was tarot. And tarot, the way it's come down, the tarot cards have been used in everyday life for fortune telling, but the truth is that was just sort of the secular way in which very deep metaphysical wisdom was transmitted. And the tarot actually is filled with symbology that has to do with the evolution of the soul. And it is a companion piece with esoteric astrology, but I won't say too much more because I can just go too far out with all of that, although I do love it. And so we're going to bring up a card. So this is the first card, the Fool, of the major arcana. And the major arcana are the big cards. They're the ones that, if you study them, represent stages in our awakening. And so the Fool is a classic figure. And he's a classic figure in literature. If you read Shakespeare, you'll see the Fool in a number of plays. There's the wise fool and the foolish fool, kind of bookends of our experience. But it's a quality of being that represents being utterly open and available to life. Can you see it well? Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thanks, John. Utterly open and available to life, which is a good thing, and that's actually where we want to get to. But if you notice, he represents right now, in this at the beginning, somebody who is very innocent and inexperienced. He is set off on a journey with a little knapsack. That's going to go far. And if you can, and he's like blissed, he's in the sun, enjoying life. You know that feeling like, wow, this is wonderful. But notice he's about to step off the cliff. Even though the little dog is now, yapping at his heels, he's still like, woo, about to go. And so he represents us at the beginning of any new venture, or at the beginning of our life, when we take on something new and we're excited, we're blissed out by it, and we're ready to go. And the truth is, we're about to fall off the cliff. Because there is no way to know what a path that is worth anything will bring to us. And as much as we might like to control or predict, it's a good thing actually that we can't, because all of our prediction would be based on information from the past. And that's ultimately too small. That's ultimately too small for us. And so the idea is we set off and we fall off the cliff, and in the falling off the cliff we learn. And we learn who we are, we learn more about ourselves, we learn more about life. Falling off the cliff sets the learning in motion. By the way, I've had 3 major falls in my life in this state. One was bliss, like, woo, I was in the Atlanta airport, blissed out. How can you be blissed out in the Atlanta airport? I don't know, but I was, and slipped. Another time I was in India, and I'd allowed myself to be rushed when I had oil on my feet and I was walking across a marble floor. And then the third time, which was just 2 years ago, I was just way too in my head. In other words, my consciousness was out of my feet. And so we want to have, the S training used to say, keep your soul in the room and your consciousness in your feet. So we want to keep our attention in our feet, even though we can be, high and happy. In a natural way, of course. So this is where we begin the journey of life. And actually, anytime we take up something new, a new relationship, this is the honeymoon period, a new business, something new that is big for us, we will be in this kind of state. And the end point is the world. So that's the last card. So there are 20 cards between them. And the world represents a completion phase or a pause in the cycle, because it leads to the Fool again, around and around we go. If you look at the card, you'll see that the figure is both male and female. So it represents, from our learning, we get more balanced in those aspects of our being. That it is suspended between heaven and earth, so it's a picture of unity. That it represents completeness or cosmic consciousness, or perfect union with the one power of the universe. And if you're doing a tarot spread and this card shows up, it means fulfillment of what you truly desire, or also the happiness that comes from giving back to the world. So you could say we start as the fool, so we fall off the cliff and we gain a world. And that's the idea, that we start off in utter availability to life but knowing nothing, and then through our learning, we gain that position of oneness and fulfillment. So let's hear it for tarot. Yay! Okay. And so what I want to say to you is that just because difficult things happen to you in your life, like falling off a cliff, literally or figuratively, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with your life. It doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It doesn't mean that that you've made a mistake. It means you've had some interesting learning that your soul has chosen for you. Emma Curtis Hopkins says, while a mistake seems to be so much, its right name is nothingness. While a mistake seems to be so much to you, its right name is no-thingness. It is no thing. Because it is not the reality of God, it's an absence. And you see, if we see with the eyes of God, and if we bring that perception to our own life, we're actually going to see the necessity of every single thing that we have walked through. Emma says, as spirit is all, she's kind of convoluted, so see if you can follow this. As spirit is all that is real of you, the facing of the worst trouble of your life with the words that the mistakes that brought them into being are nothing, that the troubles are nothing, it will have a marvelous effect in putting them in a new relation with you. So in other words, if we look at our life and we look at our troubles and we look at what we think are the mistakes that brought them into being and we claim all of that as no-thingness, nothing, we will come into a new relation with our life. And she says, I do not mean that you will be hardened to bear them. I mean they will be gone. It's according to how we label our life that we have the experience. It's according to our perception where we're seeing from, we're seeing with, and we're seeing, right? So there's a statement in ministry, and every time I say this to a minister that I'm consulting with, they groan, because I groan at it too. And the statement is this, that a minister will always conform around her or him the church he or she needs for the greatest healing. Do you follow that? A minister will always conform around him or her the church that he or she needs for the greatest healing. In other words, we as ministers know that we call people to us and the situations to us that will wake us up. And that's just how it is, you know, and after a while it starts getting really good. I mean, look at this, it starts getting really good. So the same principle applies to us in our personal life. We will conform around us, we will bring around us exactly the circumstances and people that we need for the greatest healing. It's kind of an insidious plan, but it works. It works in the long run. And it's exactly that if we are available to life and not trying to play it safe, if we are actually available to life and not trying to play it safe, we will have the situations that wake us up. We will have situations that bring us to our knees. Yeah? Anybody relate to that? That bring us to our knees so that we will let go of a smaller idea of who we are or what our life is and open up to a greater truth. Or we will have the 2x4 experience, you know that one, just one too many times, and it will wake us up to a greater reality. Or another way that it happens is that we suddenly realize our life is too small. We're feeling the constriction of too much smallness, and we open up to a greater realization and maybe speak our word more truly and at a higher level of spiritual truth than ever before, and then suddenly everything crumbles. We call that everything unlike it comes up. Do you know that one too? Yes. And that's such an interesting thing, that when we go to the higher level of truth, that which has existed starts to fall away. And there's a very beautiful teaching of Emma Curtis Hopkins about that. And what she says, first of all, it's a good sign if you're having a major crumble, so just keep that in mind. But she says that all your present life represents your former thinking. In other words, what you currently have in your life right now is a report on your thinking. Okay? Can you buy that? Okay, because thoughts create, right? And all of your current affairs, as she puts them, are held together by the glue of your former thinking. And if you change your thinking, you pull out the glue, and the structures begin to fall. The structures fall. So that new structures can be created out of your new thinking. Yes? And of course, that's a very harrowing thing to go through. And yet, I think it's a really true spiritual principle and process. And so if you're having a major crumble, it can be a very good sign that you're actually advancing on the path. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a good sign. And you might even ask yourself, okay, what treatment did I do to get me right here? It's always interesting to say, what treatment did I do? What new high thought did I have that brought me right here where the old has got to fall away so that the new can be recreated? So that's situations. If we're utterly available to life, we will call people into our lives that participate in our awakening. Emma calls them our neighbors. So you are all neighbors to each other, evidenced by greet your neighbor, greet your neighbor in church. So you're all neighbors to each other. So it's not just the people who live next door to you, it's everybody in your life. And they're also called the temptations. And the temptations, who are your neighbors, are the people who tempt you to not love them. Yeah? And here's how it works. This is another really interesting thing. Is because we're always seeing out of our perception, from our consciousness, we project on somebody something that's from our own mind, and we see them in a certain way, and then we make them wrong for it. Should I say that again? I know this so well. If what we're seeing from, we're seeing with, and we're seeing, then we see from our perception, and that's filled with all kinds of things, our false beliefs, all kinds of things. And we will project on somebody in our life what is our own character trait, or what is coming from our own mentality, and then we make them wrong for it over there. And then we struggle with them, and the blessed part of it is the friction helps to wake us up. It all serves, it just makes us miserable in the process. So this is our path. This is our path. There is really no way to escape the learning. It's only how quickly we go to the truth of, I'm having this experience, so what's going on with me? I'm having this experience of that person, so let me figure out who they're being for me. That's way from the past, or what false belief they're out picturing for me. And you see, everything that comes up in our awareness is for us to work on. Somebody said, I was sharing this in a class, and somebody said, if you spot it, you got it. Right? So everything that comes up in our awareness is our own material, because what we're looking from, we're looking with, and that's what we're seeing. And so the question is, will we go for the healing? Will we go for the greater truth? That's what it's all about. So I wanted to share a little bit more from David White. I shared from his book of poems. I'm not going to share a poem this week, but just some of his commentary. He has a new book of poems called Pilgrim. And he talks about how we work with what comes up on the journey of our life. And of course, there's this interplay between the external and the internal. But he says that the way we face the future brings about a different horizon and a different way of looking at the future than someone else. So how we're dealing with our life, how we actually face the future, has to do with the horizon we see and how we will progress in that direction. And no two lives are the same. So your path is your path, and you make the path by walking. And he says that how we shape the conversation of our life is very fateful to how we go forward in it. He uses that word, fateful. In other words, how you perceive your life, how you talk about your life, shapes how you go forward in your life. And you make the path by walking. And he says, ultimately, the way forward is the way you follow. Because there is no path except the one that you make by taking the next step that you are on. And he says that there is no path that you can follow that won't break your heart. He says if it's a profession that is sincere for you, you will somewhere along the line find yourself wanting. And not wanting meaning lacking, and not knowing how to take the next step. I can relate to that. And he says in a relationship, the same kind of thing happens, particularly the long-term ones, the ones that we call marriage, whether it's a formal marriage or not. He says every relationship will break your heart as you witness the person you made the vows to suddenly becoming so much larger or painfully so much smaller. And you yourself are changing. And he says, it is powerful to stay in the conversation, to be able to disappoint someone and be disappointed, and then make yourself large enough to join in a conversation about mutual forgiveness. I think that's beautiful. Can we stay in the conversation long enough? The couples are looking at each other like that. Can we stay in the, it's when the elbow comes out, you know. Can we stay in the conversation long enough to make it through all of those kinds of things? And how can two people learn how to grow together over the long haul? It is probably through a conversation of mutual forgiveness, as well as figuring out the ways to have lots of fun. And so he says we have to be available to life. It's not about trying to keep our identity intact or trying to hold on to things or how to keep situations in the way that we are accustomed to them or want to be accustomed to them. It is about being willing to walk the path of life, to be utterly available, to fall off the cliff, to learn, and to keep going until you gain the world. That's what it's about. So Ernest Holmes has a lovely, I'm going to come to the conclusion here, but Ernest Holmes has a beautiful little statement in the back of the textbook, and it's about the teaching in the New Testament that no man puts a new garment on a new piece of cloth on an old garment, or puts new wine in an old wineskin. Do you know that teaching? And it's the idea that as life takes place, if we're always on an ever-expanding pathway of our soul, we will inevitably come to the place where the old and the new do not work together anymore. To put a new piece of cloth on an old garment is to see rending and tearing. To try to put new wine, which means effervescent and alive, in an old wineskin, which is an old form or an old structure, there will be a rending, and the wine will be lost. And so it's about willing. You don't have to go home and eject people, places, and things from your life today, but it is about, unless that was on your to-do list anyway. But it is about being willing to see where the old must give way to the new. It's about getting out of the too small life. It's about getting beyond the box. You know, it's about getting beyond the way in which we're trying to keep everything so safe and comfortable. Because Aurora shows us life is not safe and comfortable. And yet, if we look with the eyes of God, if we're willing to see our own path as good and honor it as good, all the twists and turns, call it all good, then we will be bringing that perception of the good of God to every single thing. And to complete, David White says we're all walking from the inside of us out into the revelation. You're walking from the deepest place of your being out into the revelation of who you really are. And who you are is whole and beautiful and complete and powerful. I know these things. Thank you very much.